Severe Tropical Storm Maon expected to be closest to Hong Kong on Thursday morning. Police arrest one more person in connection with Southeast Asia's job scams. And the Thai capital braces for protests over the Prime Minister's term limit. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Severe Tropical Storm Maon is expected to come within 800 kilometers of Hong Kong tonight, and the observatory will then consider issuing the standby signal number 1. At 4 p.m, Maon was centered about 190 kilometers north-northeast of Baguio in the Philippines. It is forecast to move northwest or west-northwest at about 22 kilometers per hour across the vicinity of the northern part of Luzon and the Luzon Strait. The observatory says Maon will be closest to Hong Kong Thursday morning. Earlier today, Maon was still quite far away from Hong Kong. The sky was clear this morning, with temperatures in individual districts rising to 34 degrees or above. The city's weather forecaster says as Maon edges closer to the region, the weather will deteriorate significantly tomorrow night and winds will strengthen. Winds are expected to further strengthen on Thursday, and there will be heavy squally showers. Seas will be very rough to high with swells.
The forecast track and intensity of Maon remain uncertain under the influence of the terrain of Luzon. After entering the northeastern parts of the South China Sea, Maon will move northwestwards, edging closer to the coast of Guangdong gradually. On Thursday morning, there will be the astronomical high tide. And at the same time, on Thursday morning, Maon will be closest to Hong Kong. Under the influence of a storm surge brought by Maon, low-lying areas may have flooding or backflow of seawater.
Some online comments suggested the track of Maon is similar to that of Hato and Mangkhut, two massive typhoons that swept across the city in 2017 and 2018 respectively. Former Assistant Director of the Observatory Leung Wing Mo disagrees, saying Maon remains a severe tropical storm, which is weaker than Hato and Mangkhut. Both were classified as super typhoons. Still, he stressed, the public should not ignore the effects that a severe tropical storm could bring. Hong Kong logged 6,654 new COVID cases today, with local cases accounting for over 6,400 infections. It is the 6th consecutive day of the daily caseload surpassing 6,000. The hospital authority has started the third phase of its bed allocation contingency plan to reserve 2,500 to 5,000 beds for pandemic patients. Timothy Lee has more.
The city's schools reported 141 infections, with 5 schools suspending designated classes. Among the affected schools is To Kwa Wan's Maon Nursery, which experienced an outbreak cluster. 9 students and 3 teachers were infected in its T1 nursery room, while 15 students and 2 teachers have to be quarantined. Another 5 care homes reported new infections, with several residents and workers needing to be quarantined. Meanwhile, Tung Wah Hospital's mixed-gender medical ward reported a cluster involving 4 patients, 1 staff member, and 2 nursing students. Tai Po Hospital's female orthopedics and traumatology rehabilitation ward also reported a cluster involving 5 people. Another 10 COVID patients died, including 6 male and 4 female patients aged between 69 and 105. Only 2 of them were triple jabbed. They all suffered from chronic illnesses. As daily infection numbers reach a new high in recent days, authorities believe cases involving the BA.4 or B.5 variants make up as much as 37% of infections. Currently, 2,139 infected individuals are admitted in public hospital. Meanwhile, the hospital authority has begun the third phase of its bed allocation contingency plan. The XJ is also set to further slash its non-emergency services.
I hope the public appreciate this. The epidemic is not actually as mild as you think, even though there are not many still in hospital. But actually, the public hospital has to pay a high price now.
The Asia World Expo Treatment Center for COVID-19, which began operations yesterday, has admitted 10 patients so far. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The Security Bureau has received one more request for assistance from a Hong Kong resident in connection with Southeast Asia job scams. So far, the Bureau has received 38 requests for assistance. Caleb Leung has details.
Among the 38 requests for assistance received, the victims in 17 cases were said to be safe, with 12 of them having returned to Hong Kong. 21 remain captive, including 11 in Myanmar and 10 in Cambodia.
The difficulties we face at the moment is we could not confirm their locations. I mean, in terms of exact locations. And that is one of the hindrances. And at the moment, our immigration officers are liaising with Chinese embassy and the local CGs, try to explore all avenues to assist.
Undersecretary for Security Michael Chuk also said, so far none of the cases the authorities are aware of have involved tourists or travelers being abducted on the street. All Hong Kongers being held captive have had contact with the scammers beforehand and acted according to the scammers' instructions. Chuk said the public should be aware of jobs that appear too good to be true.
What concern me most is to make sure that no people will fall into this so-called job-related scam anymore. If they don't require any working experience, no academic requirement whatsoever, but you can make more than $1 million per year. If things are too good to be true, they're not true.
Meanwhile, the new WhatsApp hotline set up by the Immigration Department to offer assistance to Hong Kongers who were lured to other countries has so far received some 220 text or voice messages. Chuk said over half of the messages appeared to be pranks. He urged the public not to send prank messages to the hotline, as it may hurt those who are actually trying to seek help. The police have arrested one more person on suspicion of involvement in the job scams, bringing the total number of people arrested to 7. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Security is tight in Thailand's capital, Bangkok, ahead of expected protests calling for Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha to resign. Thailand's Constitutional Court has received a petition from opposition lawmakers seeking a ruling on whether Prayuth has completed his 8-year term in charge. Nazvi Karim reports.
In May 2014, Prayuth Chan-o-cha removed Thailand's civilian government in a bloodless military coup and imposed martial law. In September that year, he was installed as the country's leader, saying the military needed 1 year to overhaul the political system before elections and a return to civilian rule. 8 years later, and Prayuth is still at the helm, having pushed forward a military-influenced new constitution in 2017 and claiming victory in a 2019 election, in which his pro-army Palang Pracharat party had a clear advantage. An article in the constitution limits prime ministers to 8 years in office, and the opposition Pheu Thai party says Prayuth's time is up, counting back from the 2014 coup. Prayuth's supporters say his leadership started in 2017, when the new constitution came into force, or 2019, when he was elected, giving him 3 or 5 years left in charge. A petition signed by 171 members of the House of Representatives is asking the 9-member Constitutional Court to rule on Prayuth's term. And the uncertainty of which way the court will go is raising the temperature in a country that has seen large-scale protests and several military coups over the years. Police cordon off areas around Government House in central Bangkok, setting up barricades and diverting traffic. Should the court accept the petition, it is unknown if Prayuth would be suspended or allowed to continue until elections due to be held next year. Sporadic street protests urging the court to rule against Prayuth have been held over the past few days, and tensions remain high in the capital as Thais await the court's decision. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said advice from the Solicitor General showed his predecessor Scott Morrison's secret appointment to ministries during the pandemic was legally valid but fundamentally undermined responsible government. So the Labor incumbent has decided to launch an inquiry.
The inquiry will need to examine what happened and how it happened. It will also need to examine what the implications are for what occurred, over whether there are any legal issues that are raised, which is why we will be looking at someone with a serious legal background to undertake the inquiry. And then thirdly, it needs to look at future reform, how we can ensure that this doesn't happen in the future.
In Pakistan, supporters of former Prime Minister Imran Khan gathered outside his home on Monday to prevent police from arresting him on anti-terrorism charges related to a televised speech he gave at the weekend. Tracy Furness has more.
Police filed charges against former cricket star Imran Khan on Saturday over what they said was a threat he made in a televised speech against police officers and a judge. In the speech, he also spoke about police torture of an aide who faces sedition charges for inciting mutiny in the military. Later in the day, an Islamabad court issued a so-called protective bail for Khan for 3 days, preventing police from arresting him over the charges. The charges against Khan have escalated political tensions in the country as the ousted premier holds mass rallies seeking a return to office. Hundreds of Tehreek-e-Insaf members stood outside Khan's home on Monday in a show of support. The party has warned that it will hold nationwide rallies if Khan is arrested while working to try to squash the charges in court. Khan himself has not publicly spoken about the latest charges against him. The police report against Khan includes testimony from Magistrate Judge Ali Javed, who described being at the Islamabad rally on Saturday and hearing Khan criticise the Inspector General of the police and another judge. Khan went on to reportedly say, "You also get ready for it. We will also take action against you. All of you must be ashamed." Khan could face several years in prison from the new charges, which accuse him of threatening police officers and the judge under the country's Sedition Act. However, he's not been detained on other lesser charges levied against him in his recent campaigning against the government. Khan came to power in 2018, but was ousted in April this year after a no-confidence vote following months of political turmoil. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Ukraine cancels many public events in anticipation of Russian attacks on Independence Day. The top U.S. infectious disease expert will retire in December. And treasures from the Silk Road will go on display at the Heritage Museum starting tomorrow. Welcome back to TVB News. The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv has warned Russia plans to strike civilian and government buildings in the days leading up to Ukraine's Independence Day tomorrow. Many public events have been cancelled or postponed, fearing mass casualties. Matthew Bray reports.
As shells rain down on communities such as Nikopol across from the main atomic plant, Ukraine has basically cancelled a lot of celebrations scheduled for its Independence Day. This city has seen about half of its 100,000 population fleeing. Those that remain have seen homes and apartments obliterated by Russian rockets and mortar fire. It's a similar story in Kharkiv, a northern city that has cancelled celebrations and instead has the wounded filling its hospitals. Rocket attacks last week killed 25 people. 40 are recovering in hospitals. This man said he spent 80 days living in the metro before it was deemed safe to go back home. 3 Azov Regiment fighters released from Russian captivity have been speaking about the psychological pressure they were under, but also refuting Russian FSB claims that one of their members killed Daria Dugina in a car bomb outside Moscow. The FSB claim that Natalia Vovk, who allegedly shadowed Dugina and left via Estonia after the killing, is an Azov fighter. Vovk, they explained, is actually a soldier of the National Guard of Ukraine Military Unit 3057, and they never considered Dugina or her father, a nationalist ideologue, as targets. Meanwhile, hundreds of Muscovites were at a memorial service for the Russian nationalist's daughter. Alexander Dugin, who the bomb may have been intended for, described his daughter as a rising star who was killed by Russia's enemies. In Mariupol, the port where Azov fighters resisted the Russian invasion for months, things now have a different look. The Russian flag raised in its central square for National Flag Day, and members of a local military youth organization. One young recruit said Russia is powerful and has never lost a single battle. It's in the history books, he added. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to discuss reducing Germany's dependence on Russian energy. The two will sign a deal on supplying clean hydrogen to Germany, but in the meantime, Berlin is seeking natural gas from Canada to offset freezing this winter.
So we are in a situation in the short term where we will do what we can to contribute to the global supply of energy by increasing our capacities in the short term and explore ways to see if it makes sense to export LNG, and if there's a business case for it, to export LNG directly to Europe.
Logistical constraints and costs are likely to not allow that to take place in the short term. Natural gas prices have skyrocketed in Europe as Russia has reduced or cut supplies to dozens of countries. Scholz said Germany is building lots of ports and pipelines on its northern shores to allow for future LNG imports. In the UK, strike ballots are scheduled to open at 151 universities on September 6th. The University and College Union will run two ballots, one over pay and working conditions, and the second over pension cuts. The ballots will run until October 21st. For the first time, if the union achieves an overall turnout of 50% or above and a majority yes vote in a ballot, all participating universities will be hit by strike action. Meanwhile, more than 1,900 workers at Britain's largest container port entered a second day of strike on Monday. The staff at Felixstowe on the East Coast are taking 8 days of industrial action in a dispute over pay. They are the latest workers to strike in the country as unions demand higher wages for members facing a cost of living crisis. Separately, British lawyers involved in criminal trials have voted to strike indefinitely starting next month. That could pose further disruption to court cases in a dispute over government funding. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top U.S. infectious disease official who became the face of America's COVID-19 pandemic response, has announced that he is stepping down in December. This marks the end of his 54 years of public service. In a statement, Fauci said, "While I am moving on from my current positions, I am not retiring." He added that he is going to pursue the next phase of his career without elaborating. Fauci will leave his posts as Chief Medical Advisor to President Joe Biden and Director of the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, or NIAID, part of the National Institutes of Health. The 81-year-old veteran immunologist has served as an advisor to 7 U.S. presidents, beginning with Republican Ronald Reagan. Fauci focused on newly emerging and re-emerging infectious disease dangers. They included HIV or AIDS, Ebola, Zika, monkeypox, and COVID-19. The Education Bureau has announced measures to help local students studying on the mainland with quarantine hotel bookings ahead of the new school year. The measures include allowing the students to use the care corridor so that they won't have to fight for a booking in the daily quota of 2,000. Also, there will be more passenger flights between the SAR and mainland cities, with prioritized bookings available to Hong Kong students. They must upload the necessary documents before Friday and have that information verified by mainland authorities. The administration is also in talks with the Macau government to see if Hong Kong students can isolate in the enclave before heading to the mainland. Education Secretary Christine Choi said the students won't be undergoing quarantine in Hong Kong.
The distribution of the students are very widely spread, so we can. The most direct assistance to the students are allocate more flight. For the quarantine in Hong Kong, I think it's quite complicated or difficult at this stage.
Members of the public can now see priceless treasures from the Silk Road, with the Heritage Museum hosting the Dun Huang Enchanting Tales for Millennium exhibition starting tomorrow. The exhibition will showcase a host of artifacts from the ancient oasis city in western China, including cave paintings, bronze sculptures depicting the Buddha, and other relics. Visitors can also interact with digitally animated artwork from the Silk Road Trading Post, as the museum wants more people to appreciate the golden era of Dunhuang. The exhibition will be open to the public from the 24th of August to the 21st of November. And that's the news. Thanks for watching.